Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and I am extremely excited to be joined by political analyst, author Rebone Tau. Rebone, thanks so much for joining us on SMWX.
Hi, Sizwe. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a long time in the making. I'm always really appreciative of your analysis because you have spent time within the ANC, so you just understand the party better than we analysts who try to analyze from the outside. And we're really going to do a deep dive into the build-up to the December conference. And I don't think there's anyone better to do it with. So once again, thanks for being here. And let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the top. To what extent do you think President Cyril Ramaphosa, as we speak, is in the driver's seat for the party leadership going into December?
One thing about this conference going to December is a very interesting conference. And why I say that, you come with a National Executive Committee where the Secretary General of the party is suspended. And the Deputy Secretary General, who is late, may his soul rest in peace, Jesse Duarte.
Indeed.
So you've got an organization that does not have a secretariat, and you've got the acting Secretary General in the form of the Secretary General, Paul Mashatile. So things are not normal in the ANC, like we know historically, where sometimes you look at the Secretary General of the ANC, where they are politically, then you know that if the Secretary General is not with the President is not likely to win this conference.
Sure.
We have seen it, and I can take you back to 2007 in Polokwane, when Kgalema was the Secretary General, when he was not moving with the former President Thabo Mbeki, for the position of, when he was contesting the third term, he decided to move with the former President Jacob Zuma. You go again back to 2012 when they were united, Gwede Mantashe and Zuma, they won that conference, and then now you go to 2017 when you see Gwede Mantashe not supporting the candidate that was supported by Jacob Zuma, which in the form of Dr. Dlamini Zuma. That then shows that Mantashe then takes his numbers or the support, because the SG is very central in the administration of this process is going to December. So with Ramaphosa right now, some might say, yes, he's getting these pronouncements from provinces.
Sure.
But that might not be a true reflection, because some people might be scared of being whether arrested. Some people might also be scared of their branches failing audit. So there's a lot of things that is at play. So we might not be seeing a true reflection. A true reflection we might see maybe in December at conference, because this has been a very difficult era for Ramaphosa as the president since his election in 2017. The organization keeps speaking about renewal, the unity, and we're not feeling it or seeing it, this renewal that he has been speaking about as the president, as the political head of the ANC. So he might come back if there's he might not come back if there's a strong candidate. For now, we're not seeing any strong candidate also from the different people who are saying they're contesting for president. For example, Dr. Dlamini Zuma, Dr. MKhize, by the way, they both come from the same province, KwaZulu-Natal. I'm hearing that Didi Mabuza seems to also want to contest this thing for president of the ANC, and we know that even his province, yes, did not pronounce him, they pronounced Lamola, but Didi also is someone who is grounded, in terms of the politics of his province. But that campaign of Didi Mabuza might also be late, because he was very central also in 2017.
Sure, of course.
When he swayed the votes towards President Ramaphosa and dropping the NTZ faction just hours before the voting.
So, I mean, what you said, there's so much already to unpack, because firstly, I want to come to this question of the lack of an SG, which marks this conference out as unique. And then to think of a figure like Mashatile, because Mashatile is effectively SG, he's effectively treasurer, he's effectively DSG. And so he seems to be at a crucial part of the actual machinery of the party. To what extent do you think that will be an advantage for him going into the conference? And how would you analyze Paul Mashatile's position right now?
He sits in a very strategic position. And if you read reports coming from the last NEC meeting, that there were some in that NEC that wanted Mashatile to be removed. And their argument was that no, Mashatile can present 2 reports, which is the Secretary General's report, which we all know of, the organizational report, and the Treasurer's report. But that did not fly. And as it's alleged, in the media, that the people who were actually pushing for this, interesting enough, are people who are contesting the same position as him. The media was writing there in the papers, Oscar Mabuyane, Kensani Kubai, and Ronald Lamola. And they're all contesting the same position as him as DP. So that means that they're feeling the pressure that it is going to be difficult for them having Paul Mashatile at the center of the issues of the organization and him contesting for that position of deputy president. But then that debate did not find expression or support within the National Executive Committee. That's why Paul Mashatile remains in that seat. Whether it was strategic for President Ramaphosa is another thing, probably he because the thing is that when you speak about the CR22 or the CR17, we put Kensani outside, because she was in the NDZ faction in 2017. But Lamola and Oscar were in support of Ramaphosa, and they're contesting each other for the same position, using the generational mix ticket, that shows you that there's serious problems in that faction.
There are, and I think one other thing that comes to mind when you already give your analysis now is that Ramaphosa seems to be the clear candidate so far for the presidency, or at least the most public one. But everything underneath that is in some ways up for grabs. And so what we might see is an attempt to say, okay, well, Ramaphosa is useful for elections. The media likes him. So maybe it's useful for us to keep him at the top as a figurehead almost, but everything downwards shifts towards a different center of power. What do you think of that theory?
I mean, if you look at the current nominations, yes, it's not nominations of branches, but also pronouncement, let's say, of the different provinces, I think we are still waiting to get a sense with the KwaZulu-Natal where they stand. But as things stand, Paul Mashatile yesterday was pronounced by his home province, which is Gauteng, for the position of deputy president. We know that Limpopo a few days ago also pronounced him, while Limpopo says we also want a national chair in the form of Stan Mathabate. Gauteng has also done the same and said we also support Stan Mathabate because obviously now that means the relations between these two provinces have been strengthened. And then when you engage in the Northwest, they've just come from the provincial conference. And when you engage, you are told that no, the other core, which is close to Paul Mashatile, it is the core that has won the conference, the one that led by Nono, who is now the provincial chair. And then the other core that lost, Bushi, who was the premier, those were seen to be aligned to the president. So you have now Paul Mashatile finding a lot of support from the Northwest, from Gauteng, and from the Limpopo. So that means that Lamola, who's been pronounced by his province, is going to find it very difficult. We have seen a delegation of the leadership from Mpumalanga going to KwaZulu-Natal to engage with the leadership of KwaZulu-Natal, but nothing has materialized, because as I said, that KwaZulu-Natal were not sure if they will even pronounce. We are seeing that they have gone to Limpopo, the leadership of Mpumalanga. Obviously, they're carrying the name of Lamola, but I don't know, going to Limpopo, is it too late? I don't know, because Limpopo has pronounced the leadership on its preferred candidate, which is Paul Mashatile, for the position of deputy president. And then there's another thing that is also coming up, the what you call the Cape Town provinces, the Cape provinces, which is Northern Cape, Eastern Cape and Western Cape that
Sure.
are also in conversation. But if you put the numbers of those three provinces come together, someone was doing a calculation and they were saying it's around 1.2.
Sure.
I've not done the numbers myself, but they're saying it's 1.2. And if you put Limpopo and Gauteng, it's around 1.1. And already you have not put Northwest, which is also supporting Paul Mashatile. So right now, Paul Mashatile is seen to be a frontliner. But then you have now Senzo Mchunu now also having interest for this thing of deputy president. That means KwaZulu-Natal now has got 3 candidates in the presidency, which is in the form of 2 presidents and a deputy president. Then you go to the issue of the Secretary General. There's the name of Gwede Ramaphosa that has been also coming up. There's the name of Mtumiseni Ntuli from KwaZulu-Natal, who we know that just recently lost to what is known as the Taliban faction in the KwaZulu-Natal province. But he was elected as the PEC member. So then you have the DSG, people like Nomvula Mkonyane, who has, by the way, been pronounced by her home province, Gauteng, for the position of the DSG. Another name coming up is Phoebe Potgieter. So that means this race for DSG might be between Phoebe Potgieter and Nomvula, if Phoebe also gets nominated, because so far people were also looking at the provinces, how they are pronouncing themselves. Will there be a province that will pronounce Phoebe Potgieter? I don't know. Or will she just be nominated by branches where she will reach threshold? And then you've got the TG's position, which is very interesting. I think from a Gauteng point of view, you've got Mzwandile Masina running for that position. You've got Pule Mabe, who are these two are seen to be very close allies in the politics of the ANC, but they seem to be contesting each other. And unfortunately, yesterday, when you read the Gauteng statement, did not endorse any of the 2 candidates for the position of TG. The question that between Pule and Mzwandile, who has got the muscle to run their campaign at this 11th hour. Then you've got Ino Godongwana also, who is also contesting for this position. Then also there's Kumbuzo from Limpopo, who's also contesting for this position, and her province also did not pronounce her, but we were seeing that there is now also for candidates. So there's a lot of candidates. So there's a pool of candidates, but the question is that who will find support within the structures of the ANC? Because when you look at this pronouncement, you can't look at them in a way where you say, yes, branches, it's a conference of branches. Those pronouncements, they've got a way of influencing the nomination processes by branches.
And I think what's interesting about this conference as opposed to other conferences is just because a leadership structure in a province pronounces on one candidate doesn't necessarily mean that a province is united behind that candidate. So we can't always assume that because a province has pronounced, that definitely means that all the delegates from that province will ultimately vote in that way. So in some ways, it's one of the more uncertain conferences that we've had. We can't simply say, well, we know exactly which way each province is going.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, when you look at the provinces, you need to look at the margins of the other grouping, how much they had when they won the conference, and the other grouping that lost, how many numbers do they have? Because there's 2 things. The ones that lost, it's in their best interest to retain the delegates that they had. The one that won, it's also in their best interest to persuade some of the branches or the people that they know are strategic to come and join their core. So you might have leverage as having won a conference, but you might also lose soldiers along the way. So you need to retain those soldiers that you have, and then you can still go and take. And the other grouping can lose or can retain also. So we have seen there is no provincial conference that the ANC went to and it was not contested. All of them were highly contested. The margins, if you look at them, you find the others won by 300 200, the margin 100 and something. So those will really be a factor. I fully agree with you going to this conferences. But there's one thing that in politics there's no loyalty sometimes, especially when you look at the economy of this country. Some people need money to survive, and it's easy. And the ANC itself has admitted to this thing of money circulating. And that's why when you look at the Ramaphosa issue with the public protector, even the CR17 files that have been sealed by the courts, that they can't access those accounts, it's because of the money. And not only Ramaphosa that uses money, everyone in the ANC, you can't run for any position if you don't have money. It becomes very difficult. So that will also play a huge factor on going to December.
Let's come to the question of the presidency then, because although we've said that Ramaphosa is the most public candidate, there have been developments there. We know, for example, firstly that former health minister, also former national official in the ANC, MKhize, has really started coming out swinging now. But then suddenly, and to our surprise, the rebirth of the NDZ campaign. Now, help us understand this, because it seems quite confusing that from the same province you now have two different candidates when clearly you need an obvious challenger to Ramaphosa. What's going on with this presidency battle?
I mean, if you read reports, you'll know that there was a delegation, some who are also in the National Executive Committee who are aligned to the former President Jacob Zuma, went to go and see him. I think it was last week Sunday, if I'm not wrong. But what is very interesting, and I want to take you back to the provincial conference of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. Before that conference, you also had regions going to see the old man in Gandla. The old man seems to be playing a very strategic role in that province. And as things stand, some will tell you that the old man is not comfortable with Dr. MKhize being the candidate of the province. He's more comfortable with Nkosazana running again for December, which makes it very difficult, because within the RT, when you speak to some of the RT members of the ANC, they will tell you that they don't think that Nkosazana is the right candidate right now to contest this conference, because they feel that she has run her race in 2017 and now they need to come with a new face. So this actually makes former President Jacob Zuma in a very difficult position, because his candidate seems to be rejected by those who are supposed to go and work the machinery on the ground. Because as you can give instruction, but the people who work this machineries on the ground, making sure that they interact with branches on a day-to-day basis. They visit even delegates. The delegates will be the most important people once these BGMs are finished. So that really puts him in a very difficult. But that has also split the numbers. And with this one, it goes back to what we spoke about, the issue of the numbers, because if you look at KwaZulu-Natal is allocated, I think, if I'm not wrong, 800 delegates. With those 800 delegates, there is a portion for Ramaphosa there.
Yeah.
That means that the portion that was supposed to maybe, for example, go to MKhize alone is now divided. It has to now, some will have to go to Nkosazana Zuma. And that's why one is wondering if KwaZulu-Natal will pronounce itself. And why I want to elaborate on this. We know of the political violence in the province. We know of the Moerane Commission, and nothing has come out, in terms of the political killings. Even just yesterday, I was seeing on social media that one of the councillors was gunned down last night. So even this process might be very messy, because people will feel betrayed. People will feel sold out, and the only thing, the language they understand is the gun. And the ANC has failed to really zoom into KwaZulu-Natal on this thing of political killings in that province. So we might see people trading very careful, because in politics, as I say, there is no loyalty. people can come here and make a promise because they want to achieve a certain thing, and then when they get to the other person, they make another promise because they want to achieve something else. Then you find that they've actually made commitments to about 5 people. Now, when they have to deliver, they are not able to deliver.
That's quite interesting, and I think it also goes more broadly to the wider presidential race, because one of the murmurings you hear is that, in fact, there may be a surprise. We don't see an obvious contender and someone contesting Ramaphosa, but people are themselves scared. They know the media likes Ramaphosa. If they put their neck out, they'll be undermined publicly before the conference can happen. So there's this idea that maybe from the floor even, or very late in the day, we might see the proper alternative to Ramaphosa emerging, and that's why we haven't seen the real alternative yet.
No, absolutely. I mean, even if you look at these pronouncements, there's a guy who I say, this guy is very central in the ANC politics. Rebone Tau. We can go back as far as 2007 when he emerged as a Secretary General. In 2012, the same thing. In 2017, he dropped Zuma for Ramaphosa. And if you see now, his membership is in Gauteng, by the way. He might be linked to the Eastern Cape because obviously that's his home province where he lived. But his membership is in Ekurhuleni when you speak to some within the ANC. So that means himself, his home province, has not pronounced him.
Yeah.
So he's pronounced by Eastern Cape by the virtue that he's got a home in the village in the Eastern Cape, So this then makes it very interesting. Because if you speak to delegates who were at the policy conference, and this policy conference, which I'll come back to also as we engage further, they will tell you that the issue of Phala was tried to, some tried to raise it from the floor.
Right.
But Gwede, being the national chair, managed to, sometimes he can be very reckless how he responds.
I saw Supra trying to raise things and he was just like, no.
Very dismissive, and so he dismissed this Phala thing, Some wanted to use the issue of the National General Council not being held by this National Executive Committee, that there needs to be a review of our policies before we can go into the policy conference. Even there, he dismissed it, So he plays a very crucial role, and he's going to play a crucial role in December. So right now, these are people that when you look at people like MKhize, who is seen not to be liked by the former president Jacob Zuma, he's seen not to be finding expression in the Ramaphosa faction. So these are people that might find themselves not finding a home in the two weather factions.
Yes.
They might have to create a third way, which might come from the floor. And when people now are putting numbers together and saying, okay, we're able to reach threshold, and with reaching threshold, we can pursue some people, because sometimes delegates can be with you, but when they go to the ballot, it's a different thing again.
So we could have an MKhize Mantashe potential way where they then maybe convince some of the other people who have been overlooked in the different factions to come together. Yeah,
that might happen, because that will be because material conditions might dictate at the time, and this is the language that even in the ANC they use, that material conditions sometimes dictate, and when they dictate, you have to change your strategy. And that's why they've got this document called Strategy and Tactics, So if Mantashe really wants this thing of national chair to return, he might also say, okay, you guys are rejecting me. I'm going to go and engage with others who I think we can find each other. You have the issue of FDD Mabuza that I spoke about earlier on, that his campaign might be late, but he might also be commanding some support in the Mpumalanga province. But it's the issue that at this present moment they seem not to be talking to each other, the other groupings, because they still have hope. And I think it's just that the ANC is also late with its own processes, because next month already there were supposed to be PGCs, and those PGCs then will tell us, because if you read the rules of this conference, you need 3 people for each position.
Right.
Who will automatically go to the ballot in terms of the nomination, the numbers. So, and then for additional members, 200 people who got the most nominations will automatically go to the ballot. I even laugh at times and say, I wonder if NEC members of the ANC themselves read these rules, because these rules might come back and hit them, because some of them are not popular. They will not be able to get those numbers, you know. ANC is not a normal organization. There are people also who felt they've been removed unfairly as members of parliament in the past, or MPs or councillors. Some might want to settle scores, you know. So when you deal with an ANC, you must bear all these issues that the organization faces itself. When you speak about people who, 200 people who will go to the ballot automatically with the most nominations, I'm not sure if they will be able to do that. Most of those NEC members get those nominations, you know, or in the different provinces, because there is a new phenomenon. That's why we are seeing a moria of candidates in the officials of the ANC. So ask yourself about additional members. That means the stakes are high. And the biggest problem is because some use this as a leverage to be members of parliament, to become ministers in 2024. So for them, it's do or die right now. They need to find an expression in the National Executive Committee. And the ANC needs to have this conversation. Do they need a National Executive Committee that is going to be a burden to the ANC, or a National Executive Committee that will carry the ANC? Because the ANC is going through a very difficult time, even financially. So you need people who are financially stable, people who will not want to be deployed in parliament as members of parliament, people who will still say, I'm a CFO in the private sector, but yes, I'm available to lead, and I will serve the organization at the National Executive Committee. That means financially I'm okay to take care of myself, to do any deployment, traveling across the country. If you're deployed in KwaZulu-Natal, you're able to book yourself without being a burden to the ANC, you see, without being a burden to the state, you know. So those are some of the things that the ANC has to have, those difficult conversations with itself. And the issue of corruption, you know, I think sometimes even this issue of corruption, we tend to look at it from a point of privilege, a point of comfort. Most people over the years have joined the ANC, and they've seen the ANC as a vehicle to whether getting deployment or getting tenders. And when this corruption happens, we don't look at it in how even our economy structured. Is our economy the way structured? Is it the one breeding corruption? Because when people start now to flood in an organization for money, that means that there's a crisis in the economy, because this should ordinarily be supporters or fans of the ANC. But now they have become card-carrying members, because they know when there's a job opportunity, I'll get a job. Let's leave Gauteng and look at other provinces and zoom into them. There are provinces where outside of the municipality, there is no other economic activities in the province. So if you are able to find a job, it's either a decent job, you become a teacher or a nurse, you can work at the local clinic, or you become a police officer, or you become a military police. But if you look at Gauteng, people of Gauteng are spoiled for choice. They can go to private sector. There's you have like your UN here. You've got international NGOs that are here. So you have other opportunities where you can survive. So the ANC needs to actually look into the issue of the economy if it wants to deal with corruption, because some of these leaders who get elected, they have to take care of their own immediate families, extended families, and then they still have comrades who would come to them. I've got a problem, my child's school fees, or we've got a funeral at home, we don't have money for burial. So those are some of the things that also breed what we call corruption, because these people have to help these comrades, you know. So the ANC needs to stop tiptoeing around the issue of the economy, around the issue of land. They need to confront it, because it is really having a huge impact on the ANC as an organization, but also start to look at electing people who will not want deployment, but people who will just want to serve the organization and not want to take anything from the organization, but give to the organization. Because if you look at the ANC historically from the apartheid, during the apartheid, people gave themselves to the ANC. People carried the ANC, not the other way around. And we need to find, to see an ANC that its members will be able to carry the ANC and not the ANC carry them.
Well, Rebone, thank you for joining us and for sharing your insights. I think we need to get you back definitely before December, because your knowledge of the party, its structures and its workings is unsurpassed. So
I think maybe we must meet after the PGCs.
That would be good.
We'll do the
Let's do that.
Of
Let's
how
do
things
that.
Are to tally.
Comment down below if you want Rebone to come back on SMWX, and tag her on social media to make sure she comes back. But thanks so much for joining us on SMWX. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Aye.